Spiral Exam 2 Study Guide. Okay, with this problem, we need to put these numbers in order from smallest to largest. So we're going to start just by looking at our answers over here. So let's compare our answers and look in just this column right here. Well, I kind of agree that 6 is the biggest of all those numbers, so 6 isn't going to be helpful. Okay, let's try to look over here now. Maybe we can decide which of these between -3/2 or -3 is smaller. 3 is a bigger number than 3/2. 3/2 is the fraction 1.5. So we know that -3 is smaller than that. So I can cross off answers A and answers C. And now I'm just going to look at problems B and D, answers B and D, and see another point where they're different. So we're the same here on B and D. We're the same here, but we're not the same here. So now all we have to do is decide whether 1/2 is bigger or smaller than 1/5. 1/5 is just a little bit bigger than, we need to decide whether 1/2 is bigger or smaller than the square root of 5. The square root of 5 is just a little bit bigger than the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. So I know that 1/2 is smaller than 2. So my answer must be B. Okay, for this next one, we're finding perimeter in the first problem and area in the second problem. Perimeter is where we add up all of the sides. Let's just start by adding our x's. 4x plus 4x is 8x. So the answer can't be A and it can't be B. It's either C or D, and I needed to figure out if the second number is -3 or 4. So now we're going to add together -3, -3. That gives us -6. Add together 5 and 5. Gives us 10. And -6 and 10 combine to make 4. So our answer is D. The next one is asking us for area. And area is where we multiply the two sides. So we're going to take 5 times 4x minus 3. We're going to distribute here. The first number I'm going to get is 20x because 5 times 4 is 20. So I know that my answer is not A and it's not C. If I distribute the 5 to the -3, I get -15. So my answer must be B. Okay, problem 3. Sharon has 10 less cats than Andrea. Andrea has 23 cats. Write an equation to figure out how many cats Sharon has. So first of all, I want to focus on 10 less. 10 less cats means -10. So there needs to be a -10 somewhere in this answer. I can right away take off both B and C. D looks kind of good because it's 10 minus, but we always read 10 less as something -10. So our answer here is going to be A. X minus 10 equals 23. Problem 4, we need to start by distributing. We get 4x plus 20 equals 32. Subtract our 20 over. Divide by 4, we get x equals 3. So one thing you can do on problems like this is check your answer, which I highly suggest. So we're going to plug 3 back in and make sure that we get a true statement. 3 plus 5 is 8, so we have 4 times 8. 4 times 8 is 32, so this gives us 32 equals 32, which is a true statement. So if you didn't know how to solve this completely, we could have just checked every answer. We could plug in 3, see if it gives us a true statement. Plug in 1, plug in 13, and see which one works for us. Problem 5. If a 6-foot-tall tent casts a 10-foot-long shadow, then how long is the shadow that a 9-foot-tall elephant casts? So the way that we do this is we set up proportions. We're going to set up one proportion about the tent. So the tent is 6 feet tall, and this shadow is 10 feet long. So this is the tent's height, and this is the shadow. Equals, now we have to make the same ratio for the elephant. We know that the shadow of the elephant, how long is this? We know that the elephant is 9 feet tall, so we're going to put 9 here for the height of the elephant and x for the shadow length because that's what we don't know. Cross multiply, we get 90 equals 6x. Divide both sides by 6, and we're going to get 15 feet. Something else we can do in this problem is kind of rule out things that don't make sense. If our elephant is only 3 feet taller than the tent, then I doubt that our shadow is going to be crazy much longer than 10 feet long. So I don't think 3.57 works. Something smaller than 10 definitely doesn't work, so we could also cross off A. 30 might still be a little high, but, you know, checking and actually solving the problem gives us 15. All right, the next one, problem 6. Solve or rewrite the equation for B. So we're solving for B. The first thing we want to do is get rid of the other term, which in this case is DE. So I'm going to subtract over DE. And the last step in order to get B alone is to divide by C. So we get B equals F minus DE over C. And that answer would be answer C. Some answers that we could have crossed out to begin with would be problems, or answer D. Do you see how in D we solved for C? We don't want to solve for C. The problem says to solve for B. So that's an easy one to cross off. Okay, problem 5. If a 6-foot tall tent casts a 10-foot long shadow, then how long is the shadow that a 9-foot adult elephant casts? So let's just start by looking at our answers and seeing if we can cross any of these off. First of all, the tent is 6 foot, the elephant is 9 foot. So there's no way that the elephant's shadow is going to be smaller than the tent's shadow. So we can go ahead and cross off 5.4. Also, since our elephant is only 3 feet taller than our tent, 35.7, adding on 25 feet to the shadow seems a little bit much. So that seems like that number might be too high. So now let's solve it the correct way so we can see whether it's 15 or 30, which still seems a little high to me. So I'm leaning towards 15 on this one. So let's see. We're going to set up our ratio. We have a 6-foot tall tent, so I'm going to put my height on the top over a 10-foot long shadow for the tent. So this is my shadow on the bottom. Equals, we have to set it up the same way for the elephant. So we know that our elephant is 9 foot tall, so the height is 9 foot, and we don't know the shadow length of the elephant. So here we cross multiply. We get 90 equals 6x. Divide both sides by 6, and we get x equals 15. So our answer here was B. Problem 6, solve or rewrite the equation for B. Let's start by looking at our answers. So we're going to expect our answer to end up in one of these 4 different forms. Notice that answer D has C equals. The problem says to solve for B, so let's go ahead and cross that one off. That's definitely not our answer. Now we're left with 3 different possibilities. So to solve this equation, the first thing we're going to do, since we're solving for B, is get rid of our DE term. I'm going to subtract that over because it's positive. If I stop now and look at my answers, I believe I can cross off B because that says F plus DE. And now I'm going to divide both sides by C. And here's my final answer, so my answer is C. Problem 7, solve the inequality. Okay, to solve this inequality, we're going to start with moving the 4 away. So start by moving the 4 by subtraction. We get 10 is greater than or equal to negative 2x. And now we're going to divide both sides by a negative 2. I get negative 5 and I get x here. Now, whenever we divide by a negative, we need to make sure that we flip our sign. So it's going to end up looking like this. And then I need to rewrite the whole answer so that my x comes first, since that's how my answers are. So here our answer is going to be B. So let's talk about if maybe you forgot to flip the sign. We could all cross off C and D because 9 and negative 9s we're not using at all. Whenever you divide 10 by 2, we don't get negative 9. So we know our answer is either A or B. Just make sure you're careful about whenever you divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign. Problem 8. You're making cupcakes for a friend's party. The recipe uses 1/3 cup of cocoa powder, and you're making 5 batches of the recipe. How many cups of cocoa powder will you use? So first of all, let's look at some answers that we could probably cross off. Answer D, 5 and 1/3 cups. That seems like a lot. If I'm making 5 batches and each batch calls for less than a cup, then there's no way that I would have more than 5 cups. So let's cross that off. C still seems a little high to me, but let's see if we can solve this problem. So if each batch is 1/3, so here's one batch, here's one batch, then we're just adding those up. Or we could think about this as multiplying 5 times 1/3. The way that we multiply fractions is we just multiply straight across, so we get 5/3. If you have a calculator that simplifies fractions into mixed numbers, that'd be great. But this just becomes 1 and 2/3 because 3 goes into 5 once and has 2 left over. So our answer here is A. "28 is what percent of 80? So let's start by seeing if we can cross off any of our answers. Half of 80 is 40. So that's 50%. So our answer is definitely going to be less than 50%. So we can go ahead and cross off D. It's not going to be 55%. A fourth of 80 would be 20. So that's kind of close to 24. Let's use our percent formula now. So we've got percent over 100 equals is over of. 28 is what percent of 80? So we're going to put 28 where is. We're going to put X where the percent goes because it says what percent, and we're going to put 80 where of goes. Cross multiply. Divide both sides by 80, and we get X equals 35. Okay, next problem, we need to solve this equation for Y. So looking at all of our answers, they're all solved for Y. So that's good. We can't cross anything out there. Whenever we're solving for a variable, we always move away the term that doesn't include that variable. So we're going to start by moving away our negative 5x. We're going to move it by adding, since it's a negative. You can't combine 12 and 5x, so we're just going to put 5x and then plus 12. And then next we're going to divide each term by 3. So we get y equals 5/3 x plus 4. So our answer is A. Problem 13. Glenna wants to rent a car for a trip to Key West for 1 week. She calls 2 car rental companies to get prices. Mr. Cotter's rental rents a Cadillac Escalade for $99 for 1 week plus 11 cents per mile. Barbarino's Rentals has the same vehicle for $75 per week and 15 cents per mile. How many miles would Glenna drive for the cost to be the same? Okay, we need to start by writing an equation for the first one. So we've got y equals 99 plus 0.11x. I'm putting the x with the 11 cents because it happens every mile. It happens over and over, and it has the word per with it. The other one is going to be 75 plus 0.15x. The way that we tell when these two cost the same is by setting them equal. So I'm going to subtract both sides by 0.11x. subtract both sides by 75. And divide both sides by 0.4. And we get x equals 600. Problem 12. Given f of x equals 5x minus 12, find x when f of x is 13. So the problem tells us to find x, and we're plugging 13 in for f of x. So replace 13 where f of x was. So 13 equals 5x minus 12. Add over the 12. Divide by 5, you get x equals 5. Problem 13. Now we want to find f of 2. Usually it's written like this, f of x. So since instead of an x being in there we put a 2, that means that we're plugging in 2 for x. So in our equation we're going to have 5 times 3 squared. Anytime you have something that looks like this, you need to make sure that you square the 3 first. So it's going to become 5 times 9, which gives us 45. Problem 14. The table below represents part of a linear function. When x is 3, what is the value of y? So this is linear, which means we're going at a constant rate. At the top here we add 1, add 2, add 1. Make sure that you notice that that was going on. At the bottom we added 6 right here. So for every 1 on the top, we're adding 6 on the bottom. So if we add 2 on the top, we're adding 12 on the bottom. 6 plus 12 is 18. So my answer is D, 18. Problem 15. What type of function is represented by the table below? So just a reminder, linear is where we add or subtract a constant number. So this is a constant change. Quadratic is where we find the second difference and find that that's the same. Exponential is multiplying or dividing. And none of these is if none of those occur. So looking at our x's here, we have 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are going up by the same constant rate. In the y's, it looks like, well, it doesn't look like we're adding or subtracting anything because we went from a negative to a positive to a negative to a positive. So I'm guessing that we might be multiplying by something. So let's see. If we get from negative 5 to 20, we would have to multiply times 4. So that'd get us negative 5 to 20. If I multiply by 4 again, I would get negative, or I'd get positive 80. So that doesn't work. We're not multiplying. So we can cross off linear. We can cross off exponential. Now we need to check quadratic. So for quadratic, we're finding our second difference. So let's start by finding our first difference. Our first difference here, we would add 25 to get from negative 5 to 20. Our next difference, we would subtract 90. And then our next difference, we would be adding 390. So that's our first difference. It's all different. And now our second difference, we would be saying, let's see, 25 to negative 90, we would be subtracting 115. And that's definitely not subtracting 115 again. So this one is just none of these.